I still remember the exact shade of brass on the plaque that now hangs in the lobby of my property management office, the one that reads Honorary Tenant, Patricia Callahan. It's the same cold metallic color as the filing cabinet I picked open in the dark, the same gleam as the forged notary stamp I found inside, and the same tone as the handcuffs they put on her wrists when it was all over. 5 months before that plaque was bolted to the wall, I found a small tin box in my dead husband's desk with a note that simply said, "Do not trust her." That one sentence launched me into a year of undercover investigation, document analysis, and a final reckoning that reclaimed 5 stolen rental homes, forced my sister-in-law to pay me over $160,000 in back rent, and installed her as an honorary tenant for life. My name is Lena. I'm 47 years old. For 15 years, I worked as a forensic document examiner, the kind of specialist who analyzes ink, paper, and handwriting to tell a jury whether a signature is genuine or a slow trace job. I left that career when my first son was born, but I never really left the trade. I just redirected it into the family business, managing the books for the 6 rental properties my husband Daniel and I accumulated over 2 decades. Daniel was a civil engineer, quiet and methodical, the kind of guy who could rebuild a foundation and never raise his voice. He handled the tenants and the repairs. I did the spreadsheets and the tax filings. Together, we built a modest but solid portfolio worth about $300,000 on paper, generating enough cash flow to keep us comfortable. I gave up a paycheck for that life, and I never regretted it. Not until the day he died. One Tuesday in October, Daniel went to fix a backed-up sump pump at the Ashgrove duplex. He had a massive coronary right there in the basement. By the time the paramedics got to him, he was already gone. The shock flattened me. I remember sitting in the emergency room with my son, trying to process that our quiet, steady world had just collapsed. The funeral was a blur of dark suits and lilies and neighbors I barely recognized pressing my hand. And then, before I could even catch my breath, the vultures landed. Daniel's sister, Patricia, and her husband, Rick, showed up at our house within 12 hours of the funeral. Patricia had always been the golden child in their family, the one who could do no wrong, who charmed everyone with her bright smile and $500 haircuts. Rick was a former mortgage broker with a Rolex and a very smooth way of talking about optimizing assets. I'd never trusted either of them, but grief makes you vulnerable. They came in with casseroles and concerned eyes, and they immediately started going through Daniel's things, organizing, sorting, helping. I was too numb to stop them. Patricia was fast, efficient, moving through the house with a proprietary air. She opened drawers, flipped through files, made little piles. I watched from the doorway, leaning against the jamb, still wearing the same black dress from the service. At one point, Patricia found a small tin box in his bottom desk drawer, the kind that once held imported tea. It was about the size of a paperback, with faded blue flowers on the lid and a dent on one corner. She shook it, heard paper inside, and wrinkled her nose. "Just old receipts and junk, Lena. Let me toss it." She dropped it into a cardboard donation box headed for the thrift shop. I saw it land on top of some old clothes, the lid popping open just a crack. Later that evening, after they'd gone back to their hotel, I pulled that tin out of the box. The house was dark and silent, the kind of silence that follows a death and feels like a held breath. I sat at the kitchen table under the single pendant light and opened the tin properly. Inside, I found a stack of property tax receipts, a few ancient photographs of Daniel as a boy, and a small black leather notebook, the kind with a sewn binding and pages yellowed at the edges. I flipped to the last page. In Daniel's careful, engineer's block print, it said, "Lena, if I'm gone and you're reading this, do not trust Patricia. She has been pressuring me for years to leverage the properties. I believe she might try to take everything. There is a key taped to the bottom of the blue cookie jar on the top shelf. It opens a safe deposit box at First Mercantile Bank. Go there before she even knows it exists. I've already set up safeguards, but you need to act fast. Trust no one but Henderson. He'll know what to do." My hand was shaking. Daniel had foreseen this. He'd left me a trail. And Patricia, the woman who had just patted my shoulder and told me she'd handle everything, was at the center of a trap. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family doesn't get a free pass to steal your security. The next morning, Patricia and Rick returned with a stack of papers and a very rehearsed speech. They had swapped the casseroles for a leather portfolio and a glossy marketing folder from a real estate investment firm. Patricia sat me down at the kitchen table, poured me a cup of coffee I didn't want, and started in. "Lena, sweetheart, we know this is hard, but Daniel's portfolio can't just sit there. The leases need renewal, the mortgages need payment. You're not in any shape to handle it all. Let us streamline everything. We can consolidate the properties into a single trust, sell a couple to free up cash, and take the burden off you completely." It's what Daniel would have wanted. Rick nodded along, tapping a brochure for a gated community in Summer Lake, a place with palm trees and a golf course and a monthly HOA fee that could cover a small mortgage. "We're already looking at places close to us, so you can have a fresh start. Just sign a limited power of attorney so we can manage the properties while you grieve. We'll take care of you, I promise." The power of attorney form was already filled out, waiting for my signature at the bottom. My brain, still foggy from loss, sounded a small alarm. Daniel's note echoed, "Do not trust her." So I did the only thing I could think of. I played along. I let my face go slack, let my eyes well up, and I told them I just needed a few days to think. I said I'd never been good with legal documents, that Daniel always handled that side, and could they just explain it all again later? Patricia's smile flickered, just for a second, a tiny muscle tightening at the corner of her mouth, but she recovered. "Of course, honey, take all the time you need, but you really shouldn't be alone in this big house. Why don't you come stay with us for a while? We've got a guest suite. You won't have to cook or clean, just rest." It sounded like a caring offer. I knew it was a cage. Still, I accepted. I needed to be close to them, to watch them, and to get my hands on whatever they were hiding. Within a week, I was installed in their immaculate 5-bedroom home in North Park Hills, surrounded by beige walls and the quiet hum of central air conditioning, with my car keys and my bank card conspicuously misplaced by Rick. I was a prisoner, but a very polite one. I spent my days staring out windows and my nights planning. Before I left my own house, I made sure to retrieve that key taped under the blue cookie jar in the kitchen. I did it at 4 a.m, while everyone slept. I peeled the brittle masking tape away and found a small brass safe deposit box key, stamped with the number 1127 and the bank's logo. I tucked it into the lining of my handbag, a place I'd sewn a hidden pocket years ago for travel. I couldn't get to the bank immediately, not with Patricia watching my every move, but I knew I'd find a way. The first red flag came on day 3. I was pretending to nap in the guest room, lying on top of the covers with my eyes closed and my breathing slow, when I heard Rick's voice rising from the kitchen. He was on the phone with someone, pacing. The guest room was directly above the kitchen, and the floor vent carried sound like a tin can telephone. "No, I told you, we can't close on the Thimble Roadhouse until we get her signature. The title company is asking for the original trust document. Tell them it's in probate. Stall them." He slammed the phone down, and I heard Patricia hiss, "Keep your voice down. She'll hear." That afternoon, I wandered into the kitchen for a glass of water and saw a manila envelope on the counter with a title insurance logo. The addressee was Patricia Callahan, trustee, and the subject line read quitclaim deed 112 Thimble RD. My heart lurched. I hadn't signed any quitclaim deed, yet there it was with my name supposedly on it. When Patricia saw me looking, she snatched the envelope and laughed. "Just some paperwork, nothing for you to worry about." She tucked it into her oversized purse. I smiled faintly, the picture of a confused widow. But inside, my forensic examiner's brain was already cataloging every detail. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in their house, observing. I noticed Rick's panic attacks. He'd get calls from a number he always dodged, muttering things like the IRS notice and capital gains deadline. I overheard him telling Patricia that they'd offloaded 5 properties for $420,000, but the tax bill was coming in my name, and they had to make it look like I'd authorized the sales. The exact words I caught were, "If she doesn't sign the Birch Lane cottage, we're on the hook for the whole $83K. They were setting me up to take the fall for a massive tax debt while they sat on the cash. I saw Patricia online shopping for a new Mercedes, browsing the configuration tool with the screen tilted toward me as if she wanted me to see how well they were doing. The contrast between their spending and their supposed concern for my finances was obscene. But I needed proof, not just snippets. One morning, an opportunity came. Patricia was trying to assemble a new office chair for Rick's home office, a high-end ergonomic model with about 50 parts packed in foam and plastic. She was completely useless with a hex key. She stripped the bolt head on one of the armrests until the metal was shiny and warped, and she started shrieking about how the chair was defective and she was going to return it. I shuffled into the room, still in my robe, and said, "Let me try. Daniel and I used to fix everything in our units." In my old life, I'd spent countless hours repairing furniture, plumbing, locks, you name it. I took the Allen wrench, selected the right size from the set, and used a small piece of rubber band to pad the stripped bolt head. With gentle, steady torque, I backed the bolt out, replaced it with the spare from the hardware bag, and had the chair fully assembled in 10 minutes flat. Rick and Patricia stared at me as if I'd just performed magic. Patricia said, "Well, look at you, Handy Lena. We'll have to put you to work." That comment was supposed to be a joke, but it told me everything. They underestimated me completely. They saw a faded, grieving woman, not a former fraud investigator who once testified in federal court about counterfeit documents. From that moment, I knew I could move freely because they'd never see me as a threat. That evening, I got my first real break. Patricia and Rick announced they were going to a charity dinner at the country club, a no-host event that would keep them out until after 11. They asked if I'd be okay alone for a few hours, and I nodded weakly, making sure to look a little lost. As soon as their taillights disappeared down the long driveway, I retrieved the safe deposit box key from my handbag and called a car service from the burner phone I'd secretly purchased days earlier. I'd hidden the phone inside the hollowed-out pages of a large print Bible on the nightstand, a trick I learned from a fraud case years ago. The driver took me to First Mercantile Bank. I arrived 30 minutes before closing, signed in with my identification, and was led to the vault. Box 1127 was a standard size, cool to the touch. I slid the key in, turned it, and lifted out a heavy metal box. Inside, I found Daniel's original estate planning binder, a duplicate key to his personal filing cabinet at home, and a letter from Henderson, his attorney, summarizing the safeguards he'd put in place. That letter was stashed in my handbag. I closed the box, returned it, and was back in the house before the first cricket started chirping that evening. I now knew the scope of what Daniel had done, and I had the start of a legal roadmap. 2 nights later, I waited until 2 a.m., when the house was silent. I'd already noted that Rick's office door had a basic pin tumbler lock, a Schlage with a standard keyway, the kind you can bypass with a little patience and the right tools. When I was a document examiner, we often had to retrieve files from locked cabinets in emergency situations, and an old Navy forensics tech taught me lockpicking as a side skill. I still had my muscle memory. I slid a bobby pin from my hair, straightened it with my teeth, and bent a small hook at the end using the edge of the bathroom counter. Then I used a second bobby pin as a tension wrench, inserting it into the bottom of the keyway and applying slight rotational pressure. I raked the pins, feeling for the little clicks as each driver pin set above the shear line. The first pin gave a soft snap, then the third, then the second. It took about 90 seconds, and then the plug turned. The lock snicked open. I slipped inside the office. The room smelled of leather and printer ink. A metal filing cabinet stood in the corner, the same brass color I'd later use for the plaque. It was unlocked, but its top drawer was labeled Asset Trust 2024. Inside, I found a gold mine, original quitclaim deeds for 5 of our 6 rental properties, all bearing my forged signature and the notarization of a Cynthia Vance, notary public. The moment I saw the signature, my forensic instincts kicked in. A genuine signature has natural velocity, thinning and thickening of ink as the pen accelerates through curves, and a baseline that drifts slightly with muscle memory. This signature was a dead giveaway. Under the desk lamp, I could see the uniform line thickness of a slow, careful trace, the tiny micro-hesitations where the forger paused to mimic a letter shape, and a complete lack of pen lifts in places where my hand would naturally lift, like the cross of a T or the tail of a Y. The L in my name started with an unnatural upward hook, like someone had placed a finger guide over a photocopied sample. This wasn't a freehand simulation. It was a tracing, probably done with a light box and a sample of my signature from an old lease. Then I inspected the notary stamp impression. In my old lab, I'd spent weeks studying ink stamps under magnification, and I knew that a real notary seal has a crisp, slightly embossed surface with ink that's evenly distributed through a rubber die. This stamp was flat, printed with an inkjet printer that left a faint dot matrix pattern visible under 10X, and the commission number read NY 987,654,321. I did a mental check. New York notary commissions are 8 digits, not 9, and they don't use a NY prefix in the stamp number. The seal was a clumsy fabrication. I also noticed that the stamp impression on all 5 deeds was identical in every dimension down to the faint ink smudge in the lower right corner, a telltale sign that it wasn't applied with physical pressure each time, but scanned and replicated. I photographed everything with my phone, zooming in on those details until the pixelation blurred. Deeper in the drawer, I found the custom notary stamp itself, a metal hand stamp with a replaceable rubber pad. When I inked it on a scrap of paper, the impression matched the fake stamp exactly. Next to it was a blank notary journal, the kind you buy at an office supply store, with entries filled in by Patricia listing each deed and a supposed witness who didn't exist. I recognized her loopy cursive, the same handwriting she used on birthday cards. They'd created an entire false notary persona to execute the fraudulent sales. I also discovered bank statements showing the $420,000 deposited into a shell LLC registered in Delaware, with Patricia and Rick as the sole members. Attached was a printout from the IRS website showing an estimated capital gains tax bill of $83,000, addressed to me at my old home address. They'd used my identity to sell the properties and profit, leaving me with the tax liability. I photographed every page, closing the drawer slowly so the metal runners wouldn't screech. Then I turned my attention to his laptop. It was password protected, but I didn't need it. Paper doesn't lie, and paper doesn't have a firewall. I carefully replaced everything exactly as I found it, using the photographs I'd taken as a reference for the original positions of the papers. I wiped down the surfaces I'd touched with a microfiber cloth from my robe pocket and relocked the office door from the inside by using the lockpicking technique in reverse. I went back to my room with a pounding heart and hundreds of incriminating images on my phone. The next morning, while Patricia was humming over her green smoothie, I slipped out during their weekly housekeeper visit, taking the hidden key and burner phone, and bought a cheap prepaid envelope at the post office, mailing Henderson's letter back to myself as a backup. I also called Henderson's office from the burner. He was Daniel's estate attorney for years, a man with a slow Tennessee drawl and a mind like a steel trap. When he heard my voice, there was a long pause and then relief. "Lena, thank God. I've been trying to reach you, but Patricia told me you were too ill to talk. I have documents your husband left with me. Come to my office if you can." That same afternoon, I feigned a severe migraine during lunch, and Patricia, ever the concerned caregiver, drove me to a medical complex for a walk-in clinic. She dropped me at the entrance and said she'd circle the parking lot. I walked in, waited 2 minutes, then slipped out a side exit through a fire door that opened onto an alley and took an Uber to Henderson's office downtown. He sat me down in his book-lined office and opened a thick file. Daniel came to me 6 months before he passed. He was worried sick about his sister. He'd seen her and Rick circling your properties like sharks, so he overhauled the entire ownership structure. He laid out the documents. Every one of our 6 rental properties had been placed into an individual land trust, with me as the lifetime beneficiary and the trustee, but with a critical restriction. Any sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the trust property required my signature to be notarized by a specifically designated notary public, Susan Pelham, whose commission was registered with the county and who kept a meticulous journal. Daniel had also filed a notice of interest with the recorder's office, a public document that put everyone on constructive notice that no quitclaim deed or deed of trust would be valid unless it matched that notary requirement. Patricia, in her greed, had either ignored or never checked the county records. Her forged quitclaim deeds listed a fake notary, which meant the sales were void ab initio from the very beginning. Legally, I still owned every one of those properties. The buyers might have a claim against Patricia, but not against me. Henderson then told me the FBI's white-collar division had been investigating Patricia and Rick for a string of mortgage fraud cases across 3 counties, involving fictitious loan applications and stolen identities. An agent named Davis was in the building, waiting in the conference room. I handed over my burner phone full of photos. Davis, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a gray pantsuit, scrolled through the images of the fake notary stamp, the journal, the bank statements. She zoomed in on the notary stamp impression, then compared it to a database on her tablet. She let out a low whistle. That's enough for a warrant right now. But we want to catch them in the act of trying to pressure you into signing the last property. Would you be willing to wear a wire and go through with the final closing? We can nail them on conspiracy and fraud on top of everything else. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. Agent Davis gave me a small velvet pouch containing the wire kit, a tiny microphone the size of a pea, a transmitter the size of a pack of gum, and medical tape. She walked me through the setup, showing me how to secure the microphone within the seam of my bra's underwire, and how to activate the transmitter with a double tap on the waistband pouch. We tested it in the empty conference room, her voice crackling in my earpiece as she stood outside the door. I was ready. Before I left, Henderson gave me a sealed envelope from Daniel's safe deposit box, the one I'd retrieved myself but hadn't had a chance to open in private. Inside was a personal letter on his engineering firm's letterhead. Lena, if you're reading this, you've already figured out the trap. I built these paper walls to protect you. Be brave. Finish it. I love you. I folded that letter and tucked it into my bra next to my heart, alongside the wire. I took the kit home and spent the evening on the floor of my walk-in closet, painstakingly taping the tiny microphone into the channel of the underwire, following Agent Davis's instructions to the letter. I kept the transmitter in a small zippered pouch sewn into the inner waistband of my skirt, a pouch I'd stitched there years ago for emergency cash. I tested the rig by humming a soft tune, and Agent Davis confirmed over the earpiece that it was crystal clear. The trap was set. But before the final act, I needed to know for certain that no shred of family feeling remained, that what I was about to do was justice, not cruelty. On Thursday afternoon, the day before the scheduled closing on the last unsold cottage on Birch Lane, I staged a test. I knew Patricia would be in the kitchen around 2, making her daily celery juice concoction with the high-decibel blender that drowned out any other sound. I walked in, steadied myself against the counter, and let out a choked gasp. I clutched my chest, my left arm jerked upward, and I crumpled onto the cold tile floor. I made it convulsive, letting my arms spasm, my mouth open in a silent scream. I moaned about a sharp pain in my left arm, stuttering the words the way real heart attack victims often do. Patricia turned from the blender. She looked at me for one long, empty second. Then, without a flicker of concern, she stepped over my body and walked directly to the kitchen island where the manila envelope with the closing documents sat. She picked it up, glanced down at me, and said in a flat voice, "Stop being dramatic, Lena. We've got a signing tomorrow and you're not going to mess it up." She walked out, leaving me on the floor. Rick came in a minute later, saw me lying there, and simply said, "Get up. We need to go over the numbers." Not a call to 911. Not a single word of humane worry. I slowly pushed myself up, my palms flat on the cold tile, the imprint of the grout lines still on my cheek. Any last remaining tie to that family, any memory of shared holidays or Daniel's childhood, dissolved in that moment like a drop of ink in water. I was no longer avenging Daniel. I was eradicating a parasite. That night, I sat in the dark guest room, writing down every detail of what I'd witnessed, adding it to the mental file that would soon become public record. Friday morning, Patricia and Rick dressed me in what they called signing clothes, a navy blazer and sensible loafers that Patricia had bought for me, likely to make me look presentable for the notary. They drove me to the title company in Summer Lake, a neat little bank office with a conference room and a notary already waiting. The notary was a young man with a sleepy expression, probably hired by Rick for a quick $50. On the mahogany table sat the quitclaim deed for the cottage on Birch Lane, the last remaining property in my name. The form was filled out with my forged personal details, including a misspelling of my middle name that I noted but didn't mention. Patricia slid it toward me with a heavy silver pen. "Just sign there, honey, and this whole mess is over. You'll have nothing to worry about." Her voice dripped with false warmth, the kind you'd use on a skittish animal. I picked up the pen and held it over the signature line. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I looked at the notary, then at Patricia, then at the document. I set the pen down, letting it clink against the wood. "You know, Patricia, I spent 15 years as a forensic document examiner. I've testified in 38 cases about forged signatures, counterfeit stamps, and altered documents. I can spot a trace job from across a room. The quitclaim deeds you filed for the Ashgrove duplex, the Thimble Road house, the 2 on Maple, and the one on State Street, all of them bear my forged signature. I have photos of the fake notary stamp you made, your handwriting in the notary journal, and the $83,000 capital gains tax bill you tried to dump in my name. And right now, every word you're saying is being recorded. I pulled back the edge of my blazer to reveal the tiny black microphone clip nested in the underwire of my bra. Patricia's smile froze and then shattered like cheap ice. Rick lunged for the door, but it swung open before he could touch the handle. 4 FBI agents and 2 local detectives flooded the room. Agent Davis stepped forward with her badge and announced that Patricia and Rick Callahan were under arrest for multiple counts of forgery, grand theft, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and tax evasion. Patricia shrieked something about a setup and how I was a crazy old woman, but the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists with a satisfying finality. I looked her straight in the eyes, my voice calm for the first time in months. You should have remembered that I'm the one who knows ink. Daniel left me a paper trail, and you left a trail of ink. Ink doesn't cheat, and it doesn't lie. The sleepy notary just gaped at the scene, then quietly excused himself, probably reconsidering his career choices. In the months that followed, the legal system ground its slow, magnificent mill. Patricia and Rick, facing a mountain of physical and recorded evidence, pleaded guilty to reduced charges in a deal that still netted them 7 years each in federal prison, to be served at a medium security facility in West Virginia. The court voided all 5 quitclaim deeds, returning the properties to me free and clear, since the trusts had never been properly executed. A county judge signed an order expunging the fraudulent conveyances from the public record, and I received certified copies that I keep in a fireproof safe. The flipper who had bought the properties, a man named Gregson who thought he'd snagged a bargain, sued Patricia for fraud and won a summary judgment that seized every remaining asset she had, including the North Park Hills house and the new Mercedes that hadn't even been fully paid off. She was left with a prison jumpsuit and a public defender. The IRS, once they saw the evidence package I provided with Henderson's help, revoked the tax bill against me and transferred the entire liability, plus penalties and interest, to Patricia's Shell LLC, which they emptied with surgical precision. Meanwhile, I filed a civil suit for conversion and unjust enrichment, seeking back rent for the 8 months Patricia and Rick had collected rental income from my tenants without a shred of legal right. The judge, after reviewing my spreadsheets and the tenants' affidavits, ordered restitution of $162,300, representing every penny of rent plus interest at the statutory rate of 9%. The check was delivered to my attorney's office on a Friday afternoon. I took that money and poured it into a new beginning. I formed my own property management company, Steadfast Properties LLC, and transferred all 6 properties into the company using proper legal documentation drawn up by Henderson. I hired a good maintenance crew, including a retired plumber named Mr. Olivetti, who had once taught Daniel about sump pumps. I renewed the leases at fair market rates, personally calling each tenant to explain that the previous management had been illegitimate and that their rents would now be stable and protected. 3 tenants told me Patricia had tried to illegally raise their rent mid-lease, and I reversed those increases retroactively. I started building what Daniel and I had always dreamed of, a portfolio that would provide for our son's future. But I wanted a permanent reminder in our new office, something that would make me smile every morning. So I commissioned a small brass plaque, 12 inches by 8, from a local engraver who specialized in memorial plates. I chose the same brass finish as the filing cabinet I'd picked open, and I specified the font to be a clean serif, like the one on a legal summons. In the spring, I had it mounted on the wall in the lobby right next to the tenant bulletin board. At the unveiling, I invited Henderson, Agent Davis, and a few of the tenants who'd suffered under Patricia's brief reign. The plaque reads, Honorary Tenant Patricia Callahan in recognition of her involuntary contribution of $162,300 in back rent, memorialized here as a permanent reminder that integrity always wins. New tenants sometimes ask about it when they come to pick up keys or sign their lease. I just tell them, we run a very thorough background check on everyone, even our honorary tenants. The plaque has become a local landmark of sorts, a quiet little monument to karma. Once, a young couple took a selfie in front of it and posted it on social media with the caption, Savage Landlady Energy. I didn't correct them. Daniel was the quiet architect of our lives, but in the end, his careful paper trail was the weapon that saved me. He had foreseen the betrayal and built a fortress out of ink and trust law, locking the doors before the thieves ever arrived. I learned that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's defined by who you can trust with your signature. I also learned that my skills, the ones I shelved 20 years ago for motherhood, never really left me. They were just sleeping, waiting for the right lock to pick and the right forgery to expose. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If you believe that the truth is always in the details and that no one has the right to steal your future, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. Until next time, remember, read the fine print, keep your eyes open, and never underestimate the quiet ones. I'm Lena, signing off.